Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today discussing Bethesda Game Studios' rumored new IP, Starfield. The following information comes from an interview by GameSpot during E3 2017. While watching this interview, I couldn't help but think to myself, wow, how have we not discussed this before? Especially with Starfield speculation ramping up, this interview provides tons of vital information, and I will have it linked in the description down below, along with Camelworks video where I discovered this interview through. For now though, allow me to go ahead and play the clip of the interview I will be referring to throughout this video.
Elder Scrolls 6 is coming, right? Like it'll come.
Elder Scrolls 6 will eventually be made, but
Okay.
it is multiple big releases down the plan for those folks. They felt like they wanted to work on some other stuff and do some other things, and quite honestly, like they didn't want to be a developer that was just Elder Scrolls Fallout for the rest of their development careers. And you've got a lot of people in that studio who have been there a really long time, and they wanted to be able to sort of self-determine what things they worked on next, whether it was existing stuff, whether it was new IP, and I think Todd and his team have earned the right, given the quality of this stuff, to be able to say, look, we know that everybody really wants Elder Scrolls 6, but we as creative people want to be able to do stuff that we're really passionate about. And I think once you see sort of how the next two titles come out, and then how Elder Scrolls 6 kind of ties into what those games are doing and about, I think it'll all make sense.
Now before Pete mentioned any of that juicy info, he also had this to say.
But are you able to speak to anything that's past 2017 for Bethesda?
There's some really cool stuff coming down the road that I've seen, that I've gotten to play, that I've gotten to, but
we're very excited.
Yeah, we're not ready yet to talk about down the road.
The reason this information is going to be treated as a lesser of value is because we don't know if it directly has to deal with Bethesda Game Studios. Now the speculation and logical conclusion hints that Starfield will be dropping this year. So it would make sense that last year, one of the games that Pete Hines was playing was Starfield, which means that it would be at a point ready for reveal come this E3 a year later. But it is just an assumption. We are not 100% sure on that. What we are 100% sure on is some other stuff that he mentioned about Bethesda Game Studios. One of them is a point worth reiterating: Elder Scrolls 6 being multiple big releases away. Bethesda is intentionally being very transparent about this because they are trying to avoid any disappointment from fans when it comes to the reveal of this new IP that Bethesda Game Studios is working on. I personally think this is a smart choice, but there are still people anytime Bethesda talks about anything who go, please release Elder Scrolls 6. And especially with ESO still being relevant, I can tell you now, Elder Scrolls 6 is a ways off, and they have said it time and time again. And I think it makes sense. Although I am incredibly excited for Elder Scrolls 6 and want it just as badly as you guys, it is important that they work on new stuff and do other things like Pete Hines mentioned. They don't want to only be known for Elder Scrolls or Fallout. I think Fallout 4 is the best example of showing us that we have a studio that has good ideas but the wrong games. Like Settlement Mode in Fallout 4. I think Settlement Mode would have worked in any other IP, but in Fallout, it simply doesn't work and detracts from what makes Fallout special. You apply that in a new IP, perhaps it doesn't draw away from that universe as much because we're all discovering it for the first time. So I personally want to support them in these new ventures because I think they need to spread their wings for Elder Scrolls 6 to be that incredible game we're looking for. What was also very interesting and caught the most attention for me personally during this clip of the interview was when Pete Hines referred to two new games that tie into Elder Scrolls 6 somehow. I feel the assumption when listening to this at first will be a spin-off maybe, but no. I believe this has to do with game systems from the new IPs and how they'll carry into the Elder Scrolls 6. Something along the lines of multiplayer perhaps. We do know Bethesda Game Studios is working on a freemium title thanks to a job listing. I'm sure that means that they are working on a multiplayer title then. Perhaps this multiplayer is co-op. Does that mean that we'll see co-op in Elder Scrolls 6, right? I think that's how it's going to carry on. We're going to see different little game systems that crop up and have a certain DNA that will be shared throughout future BGS titles. And it's going to be interesting to see when we find out whatever Starfield is, what could possibly be carried into an Elder Scrolls 6. Because while Fallout and Elder Scrolls are very different, they do have that same DNA of exploration. It's very much handled the same way in both series by Bethesda Game Studios. So that's why I've deduced personally that I think it's going to be game systems and not actually the story or the worlds itself that tie into Elder Scrolls 6. So a lot of interesting information here to digest. Hopefully the stuff that is playable, one of those titles is Starfield, because if that is actually the case, then we can pretty much guarantee at this point Starfield is coming this year. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on the rest of this information in the comments down below. It's going to be interesting to see us all dissect it as the speculation and excitement for Bethesda Game Studios continues to ramp up. Follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook, those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it fuels all the content we create here. Stay sexy, stay active, I love you all, peace.